Hello, it's Alden. Here's how I did the flaming skull shot in the Batman Beyond introduction. I start in Blender by setting up the shot, which is just taking the camera and having it face straight down. Then I used the Blender Kit add-on, typed in skull, and searched and found a skull model. And the nice thing about Blender Kit is that it's free and all of the models show up textured and ready to go, and you don't need to go to a website, download something, import it. It's all just right here within Blender, which is great. And the skull texture actually looked pretty good. So then I went and looked at the animated intro of the skull shot, and not only is there kind of this green fire behind him, but the light on his face is kind of moving around, or there's some type of oscillation of the skull. So to do that, I decided to add an empty and then some area lights, and I'm going to parent all of the area lights to the empty and then have it spin around so that there's kind of this spinning light effect on the skull. After that, I'm going to add the fire. I tried to really quickly add some like fog and flame simulations in Blender, and I've definitely done that before, and I think every time I need to do it, I actually have to go back and watch somebody's tutorial because step by step, I was just forgetting how to make it work, and I got a little bit annoyed, so I just gave it up and decided instead to go find some footage of an explosion and bring that in as an image texture instead. So I went to pexels.com, which is a free stock footage and photo website where you can download everything royalty-free and for free. So I went and found some explosions. So I downloaded the two kind of big explosions that there were. The rest is sort of like fires or CG elements, which I don't really need. So I'm going to add a plane, and then in the texture here, I'm just going to drag and drop that video clip and put it into the base color. I'm going to check cyclic and auto refresh, and that'll make sure that the video clip plays. And when it's done, it'll just repeat over and over again. So now I want to make the dark parts of this layer transparent. So I'm going to add a mix shader, add a transparent shader, and then use the color from the video clip as the factor between the two. Then I'm also going to add a color ramp to adjust the levels of what's transparent and what isn't. Now I'm going to go and add RGB curves to the color of this flame. So I want the flame to be green, so I'm going to drop the reds and increase the greens. I'm also going to drop the blue a bit. When you go into the actually rendered preview mode, that flame looks a lot better, as you can see. I want a couple instances of the flame, but I also don't want them to look exactly the same. So I'm going to duplicate this plane and then also duplicate the material as well. And I'm going to go into the shader editor and then drop in the other video clip that I have and just swap it out. Make sure you set it to cyclic and auto refresh. Duplicate everything, scale it up some more, rotate it a bit so it's, a little bit offset. And suddenly we have just layers and layers of fire here, all from a video texture. I'm also going to take instances of the fire texture and kind of place them around the skull and scale them up just to have them shine some light onto the skull itself. And I'm going to do that by taking the color and then also bringing it into the emission space. Because this skull is supposed to be Derek Powers, I wanted to kind of like add another sort of like illusion to him, and the animation sort of had the skull kind of fracturing or something, so I thought it might be kind of cool to add this image of an older man. This also came from Pexels, and sort of have this kind of ghostly version of Derek Powers' face over the skull, just to kind of convey that, his face is kind of falling off because of all of this, irradiated power that he has. I spent a lot of time kind of like making him semi-transparent and using different textures and things to make that transparency a little irregular. And what I ended up with was kind of like a cool ghost effect. It kind of actually reminded me of the ghosts in Lord of the Rings, but it just didn't feel quite right, in my opinion, to the shot. So ultimately, I got rid of the whole thing and just did the skull and the flames. But even all of the things that you do when you're working on your own 3D scenes or renders or what have you, even if you kind of go in a direction and ultimately decide to scrap it, It's always helpful because I'm sure there will be a time where this technique or this look will be relevant and I will have already kind of had it filed away based on this trial. So don't be afraid to like take a risk or try something and then scrap the whole thing if you need to, because it could be helpful later. This shot also came together very much in After Effects in the compositing. So I'm gonna add an adjustment layer and add a turbulent displace effect. And then I'm gonna mask it so that it's only outside of that skull. So this is just gonna add some kind of like displacement and texturing to the flames. So if you alt-click evolution, you can put this expression time times, let's start with 1,000, and that's going to keep constantly animating without keyframes. Then we can adjust the size and the amount and the timing and basically do some trial and error until we get kind of like a heat wave sort of distortion coming from those flames. I'm also going to add a color grade over it, and then I'm also going to add a CC radial blur. I'm going to set it to faded zoom, and I'm going to copy the mask from the displacement and blur so that the zoom doesn't affect the skull at all, and that's just going to kind of create some softness on the outer edges of this flame. And there we go.